Okay. So the B-17 was, we mass produced those, and we're going to lose a lot of them, but it's always kind of important to remember that you're always making more aircraft as they're being destroyed as well, so you don't run out of planes. Okay, so I had a couple pictures. These are ones I took here in Wichita at the air show at Jabara. Now the struggling economy in recent years has, they don't bring this every year because it's expensive to fly these things, just to fuel them and so forth. But this is one that's in really good shape. There's still about 15, 17 of these things that are still flying, airworthy, that people own, individuals own, and they'll fly them around the country to different air shows. You guys are familiar with the B-29 that was made here in Wichita. They just refurbished it. It was the one that we used to drop the atomic bomb. B-29. It's the big one at the bottom up there on the map. And the only one that is airworthy in the world today is in Wichita. Its nickname is Doc. They would paint a cartoon figure or sometimes a woman on there, sometimes scantily clad. This one is called Sentimental Journey, and you have this woman in a bathing suit. But all different types of names and so forth for these. And the seven dwarfs. Doc is one of them, and that's what they named that B-29. And they actually took that plane from what they call the Boneyard. There's a place out in, I think it's in Arizona, where they have all these old aircraft. It's just like a cemetery for aircraft. And it took about $100,000 per engine to repair or to recreate, and then make it airworthy. What was kind of cool about the process of rebuilding Doc here in Wichita, took a lot of volunteers, and you had people that had worked on the plane during the war that are still alive that got to help with the project. Obviously, they had to raise a lot of money, but one of those people was Mrs. Nielsen's mom, Connie, who worked on the B-29 at Boeing during the war. I had a couple of students a few years ago. I forget their name, but these were tall girls that were skinny, and their grandmother was the same way, tall, skinny, and she was like, because of her size, she was able to get into a part of the B-29 that most other people couldn't do it. So she was like really important to the process. Okay, so. This plane is kind of a legendary aircraft. There's a really good movie called Memphis Belle. I think I might have mentioned it to you the other day. But in the video we just watched on this, they talk about those escort fighters, okay? And once they developed the long-range fighters to escort them, they could protect them and fight off the German fighter planes with these P-51 Mustangs, okay? There's a guy in Wichita that owns one of these P-51 Mustangs, and he always brings it to the air show. This is a great aircraft. I talked about the Spitfire during the Battle of Britain. This is a fabulous aircraft, probably our best fighter during the war. And they could, connect extra fuel tanks to the wings so that they could go out and protect our bombers. Now, there was a group of pilots that's pretty famous today that I want to mention, and that is the Tuskegee Airmen. Okay. Anybody know anything about these pilots? They were black. Okay. Remember, our military was segregated. Yeah, I spelled it right. Our military was segregated during the war. Okay, so blacks and whites didn't serve together during World War II. It was pretty rare. When it came to pilots, and women have gone through this as well, okay, they thought that, you actually kind of got to be smart to fly a plane, okay? And I'll say this about my dad, because my dad was a pilot. He was pretty smart, but in Korea, he flew transport planes instead of fighter planes, because my dad said I wasn't smart enough to fly the fighter planes, all right? There's a lot of math involved, and people believed, wrongly, that African Americans couldn't become pilots or good pilots because they weren't smart enough, okay? Obviously this is a fallacy. So there's a shortage of pilots, and there were black pilots in the United States that flew planes, okay? And there were really smart black guys as well, and they wanted to fly. They wanted to join the Army, okay? So eventually, because of the shortage, and I think maybe with the urging of Eleanor Roosevelt, they started a training black pilots at Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. Okay, this was originally, Tuskegee Institute was founded by Booker T. Washington, okay, to try and train African Americans in different skills so they could go out and be productive citizens, okay? Well, it was at Tuskegee where these guys, they pulled them in from all over the country. They had high test scores and so forth, and they trained them to fly these planes and become military pilots. The problem was that the higher-ups in the Army didn't want to use them. So eventually, with some pressure, they were sent to North Africa, the Tuskegee guys, and they weren't given any real important missions, and they were just kind of sitting around. Not much was going on. Once we took Italy, we started bombing Germany, not just from Britain, but now we started sending bombers up from Italy into Germany, okay? And so we needed escort fighters for those pilots that were flying the B-17s up from Italy to Germany, like we just watched, okay? And these guys, these Tuskegee guys painted their, the tail of their P-51s red. So they became known as the Red Tails. And there's a movie called The Red Tails. Now this is a HBO movie that was done called The Tuskegee Airmen, okay? And some of the same actors play in both movies, okay? Like Lawrence Fishburne here, and Cuba Gooding Jr. and others. But it is, I like the HBO movie a little bit better than The Red Tails. I was thinking, man, this is going to be awesome. They're coming out with a big Hollywood production for this movie. It's going to be really good, and I was pretty disappointed in it. So anyhow, these guys had a spectacular record of bringing back their bombers. So like if you send out 100 bombers and your job is to protect those 100 bombers, and they all come back, well, the pilots of the bombing crews are going to be wanting, hey, we want those guys to go with us, okay? And the bombers didn't know that these guys were black, okay? And they started requesting the Tuskegee guys, and then they realized that they were black, and they were like, oh, okay. So the struggle here for these guys, and fortunately, later in life, especially, they have very much been recognized. I'm surprised that more of you hadn't heard of these guys before, but I'm glad I mentioned it. So these guys definitely made a great contribution. The story goes they never lost a bomber. Never lost a bomber. Okay, so if I'm a bombing crew, I want those guys. Now, that being said, this was a little bit later in the war, and the Luftwaffe had been, taken out quite a bit. So there weren't as many, but either way, their service and sacrifice is of definitely something we should, talk about. All All right, so I took these pictures. That's Jack when we went to the air show. All right, so the Germans are coming up with some new technology. All right, and this is where we're moving into the age of the jet engine and rocketry. All right, and they're going to develop two weapons here of terror. One is called the V1 rocket. Okay, and the V1 is this one over here that kind of looks like an airplane. Okay, it's got wings. The V2 is more your conventional rocket. All right, and it is the technology found in this V2 that eventually is going to help the United States put a man on the moon. This is the same technology we're using today to launch satellites into space. Okay, and the lead scientist on the V2 program, does anybody know his name? How many of you guys been to the Kansas Cosmosphere at some point and studied this? Okay, good thing I'm talking about it. All right. His name was Wernher von Braun. Okay, and he's the guy that came up with this technology. Now I'm just going to go ahead and foreshadow a little bit. At the end of the war, the Germans have developed the first jet fighter, okay, and this rocket. And so there's a race at the end of the war to capture these German scientists. The Russians want them, and we want them. It's an operation. It's called Operation Paperclip. And we're going to try and get these German scientists, bring them to the United States. And that's exactly what we do. Wernher von Braun comes to the United States and goes to work for this new agency called NASA. Okay? And he's going to be teaching our scientists a lot about this stuff. All right? Now, these systems were not without failures. But I can tell you this, guys. These weapons are weapons of terror. They do not really serve a military purpose because they're dumb bombs. I think I talked about dumb bombs the other day. Did I talk about that here? During World War II, our weapons are dumb. They're indiscriminate. They kill wherever they land. That's what happens with these. They can't target a specific building with these. So the V1 is a pulse jet engine. And they're going to launch these off of ramps. They're in France. They're going to launch them across the English Channel into cities like London. So these things have a very distinctive sound I'll play for you in a moment. And you can hear them coming and you can see them because they're traveling between 400 and 500 miles an hour. So you can see and hear them. They're loud. Okay? What happens is they run out of fuel. Okay? And attached in here is a 1,000-pound bomb. So when it runs out of fuel, you stop hearing it. And then it starts to fall out of the sky. And then about 10 seconds later, you're going to hear an explosion. Okay? The V2 traveled faster than the speed of sound. So you didn't hear it before the explosion hit. And it carried a payload of 2,000 pounds. And these things were deadly. Okay? Now, on a rare occasion, the V1s were a lot easier to deal with. And the British came up with a name for them. They called them doodle bugs. All right? And you could shoot these things out of the sky with anti-aircraft fire. You could see it come across and you're shooting at it, you know, and hitting the flak, you know, just like they were shooting at the bombers here, okay? And you could hit them, okay? Didn't always hit them, but you could, especially if you had guns in that area. But this picture here is kind of cool. This shows a Spitfire pilot, probably at full speed, flying up next to a V1 rocket and taking the wing of their aircraft and hitting the wing of the V1, sending it into a spin into the English Channel before it reaches London or England. Okay? Which is a pretty crazy thing to do if you're a pilot. Okay? Because if that goes wrong, it blows up and, you know, you're dead. But yeah, I mean, that's an amazing photograph right there. right, so I have a couple videos to kind of share with you on this, on the V1 and V2 rocket. You know, probably like 8 years ago now, I used to have this audio, and they interviewed this young girl from England. If you like that English accent, this is a young English girl speaking about the aftermath of one of the V2 rocket attacks that hits a Woolworths, like a department store. And she was near that, and she describes what she saw, and it was on this maritime website in London, and the link is gone. It doesn't work anymore. I emailed them yesterday over there in UK and asked them if they could send me a link or the audio file, because it really left an impact with me, and I wanted to share it with you, but I haven't received an email back from them yet. But here, I've got a couple of clips here. And I believe this is just the sound of a V1, if it's going to work. Come on now. That's an actual recording. Okay. You gonna open? Thinking about it. There it comes. Come on. Gosh. There we go. This doesn't have any audio, it's just basically some video of these V1 and V2 rockets. Okay, so just get some color footage there, and it's a pretty good video. I got a couple more here. This is actually the aftermath of that Woolworth bombing over here. You could see the type of damage a V2 rocket would do. Okay, and then this website shows you kind of the number of bombs they used here, and the type of damage it did.
You just deleted it.
Oh, crap.
Press undo.
I did.
Control Z.
Okay, I have it here. Holy cow. How come that's so much longer than it used to be? All right. That stinks. And then it won't open. It's saying it's not found. Huh. Sorry. Let me do this. B1 and B2. Look at this. Casualties. Let's try this one. No, that's a message board. Yeah, here we go. Of course, it's not opening. Here we go. Oh no! Getting all these ads. Okay, death from about 70 years after the first one fell. Interactive map reveals. Okay, these are attacks around London. From the V2. That's that Woolworth picture I showed you, I think. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I'll have to find that. But there's some good websites on like where all these bombs landed and how many people it killed and that sort of thing. What happened? Okay. Yeah. So you kind of get an idea, anyhow, right? Of the devastation of these weapons. And like I said, they didn't really serve a military purpose. Once D-Day takes place and we go into France, they won't be able to launch these any longer on Britain. Okay, so it's kind of there's a window there where these bombs really, I mean, they killed tens of thousands of people in England. Okay, very frightening. And if the war would have lasted, they would have gotten a better opportunity to make these weapons smarter, if you know what I mean. Okay, so the last thing today is we're getting ready for D-Day. Okay, which is June 6, 1944. If you guys want to write these down, and then I will do a whole lecture on this on Monday and take you through D-Day, okay, which is named Operation Overlord. Oh, I'm going to turn these on. And you guys already know that Eisenhower's the Supreme Allied Commander, okay? This is going to be the U.S. and Great Britain. Canada is going to help as well. And you know that body of water, the English Channel, that lies between the island and the continent, okay? The Germans have 4 years to prepare for this day. Okay, now we have been bombing and trying to damage the Luftwaffe, as we already discussed today. And we're also going to get some help from the French Resistance. Okay, the French Resistance is groups of French people in France that are going to help with this invasion. Okay, so I will go over the entirety of D-Day Monday, and probably that's going to bleed into Tuesday. Good? All right. You guys have a good weekend.